Good evening, everybody. It's good to see you tonight. Thanks for being here. We continue studying about the miracles of Jesus in this Wednesday night class. Just a lot to learn. A lot of important evidence is supplied by the miracles that Jesus worked. And of course, we keep repeating that that was the purpose of the miracles. The purpose of the miracles were to reveal that Jesus is and was the only begotten Son of God, and not only to reveal it, but to offer proof and evidence that that revelation is true. The miracles that Jesus performed. We're going to talk about two instances tonight where Jesus raised people from the dead. Now, I don't know about you, but that ranks way up there. If you want to talk about significant miracles, raising someone from the dead, all the miracles are amazing, but this is incredible. I've often said, if somebody wanted me to believe that they were speaking for God, or had a revelation from God, or had some news about something I'm supposed to be doing religiously, if we could go out into the cemetery and raise a dead body out of the grave, I'm inclined to believe that all the miracles are impressive, but raising from the dead would have to be most incredible. When the subject of divine healing and so forth, when that's been debated, the challenge has been put forth. Some of our brethren have put before, say, Pentecostal preachers, let's go out and raise somebody from the grave. Let's go raise a dead person. Of course, they're not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole because they can't do it. They can't do any miracles. They certainly can't do that miracle. But it really is impressive to think about someone raising the dead. So our first episode is in Luke chapter 7. Let's read this, Luke chapter 7, beginning verse 11. It came to pass the day after that he went into a city called Nain, and many of his disciples went with him, and much people. And when he came nigh to the gate of the city, behold, there was a dead man carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and much people of the city was with her. And when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her, and said unto her, Weep not. And he came and touched the bier, and they that bare him stood still. And he said, Young man, I say to thee, arise. And he that was dead sat up and began to speak, and he delivered him to his mother. And there came a fear on all, and they glorified God, saying, This is a great prophet, that a great prophet is risen among us, and that God hath visited his people. And this rumor of him went forth throughout all Judea and throughout all the region round about. And the disciples of John showed him all these things. And John, calling unto him two of his disciples, sent them to Jesus, saying, Art thou he that should come, or do we look for another? When the men were coming to him, they said, John Baptist has sent us unto thee, saying, Art thou he that should come, or look we for another? In the same hour he cured many of their infirmities and plagues and of evil spirits, and unto many that were blind he gave sight. Then Jesus answering said unto them, Go your way, and tell John what things ye have seen and heard, how the blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, to the poor the gospel is preached. Okay, so this takes place in or near a city called Nain. Nain is a city in Galilee. If you can kind of envision in your mind the map of that region and the Sea of Galilee, Nain would have been southwest of the Sea of Galilee. Actually, it was not very far from Nazareth, where Jesus grew up. So that's where this happened. So the only son of a woman, the only son of a widow woman, had died, and they were taking him to be buried. I think probably there's some intended significance to the fact that it's pointed out he was the only son of this widowed woman. We often talk about how that in those times there was not the social safety net that we have. If you had a widow and she had an only son and he died, there would still be different programs and agencies that would offer help and assistance to a widow in such circumstances. Not so back then. And so when this woman's husband had died, that put her in a pretty precarious situation as far as being able to support herself and have her needs met. And undoubtedly, she would have relied heavily upon her son, her only son, to make provisions for her care. Now he's gone. And so this woman would have had, an extreme reason for grief. Not only has she lost her husband, now her son, and now what's she going to do going forward? All kinds of questions would have come up. And so Jesus says, verse 13, that Jesus saw her and had compassion on her, told her, weep not. You can imagine that she was in an extreme condition of grief. This was new. This hasn't happened just, this is not something that happened a week ago or 10 days ago. Sometimes now when somebody dies, it may be a week, maybe longer sometimes, before the funeral and the burial takes place, because very often we're waiting for relatives from other distant places to be able to travel, to come in, to participate in the process of the burial. But we have embalming, right? I remember one time asking an embalmer, after he had done his work on a body, I said, how long now, after this body has been embalmed, how long before we need to get him in the ground? And I was shocked. This guy who knew his trade very well said, if I've done my work properly, we can set this man up in the corner and he'll look just like this a year from today. And so embalming is pretty incredible in regards to how it can preserve a human body. The Jews didn't embalm and don't to this day. But they did not embalm, and so they buried people the same day they died. And so it's very likely that all of this grief that this woman is just flooded with has come upon her suddenly. She hasn't had a chance to assimilate all this and figure out what's going to happen. All she knows right now is the grief that is just overwhelming to her at this point in time. So Jesus had compassion on her, and he raised the young man. Verse 14, he came, touched the bier, and they that bare him stood still. He said to the young man, I say to thee, arise. And he that was dead sat up and began to speak. Can you imagine the shock that this would have produced? What if you were at a funeral home, somebody has died, and you're standing around the casket talking to some of the family members. Suddenly that guy in the casket sits up and begins speaking. I'm telling you what, that'd be crazy. Panic would just overtake everybody. That can't happen, can it? No, that can't happen. Well, in this case, it's what did happen. I think a skeptic would probably want to argue that the guy really wasn't dead. They assumed him to be dead, but he wasn't actually dead. How would you answer if, given that skeptical, in other words, I'm a skeptic and I want to explain this miracle away. I'm saying he wasn't really dead and he just revived here and sat up and began to speak. How are you going to answer me on that? Anybody? Tom? Why hadn't he set up earlier? Why didn't he set up before Jesus got there? Okay.
So that's one. And two, they sort of do what dead people were.
I think so too.
It wasn't something that was on, they carried him out. And here it's Luke's account of it. He was doctors.
Yeah.
Evidently he did some evaluation of it as well.
Yeah. I think we're a little bit arrogant. We know so much about medical matters and technical matters. Those people back then were so dumb and so ignorant and so uneducated and uninformed. They couldn't even recognize a dead person when they saw it. That's not true, right? These people dealt with death on a far more personal basis than we do. They surely knew what a dead person looked like, right? Dan. Yeah, they know. They deal, and like I said, they deal with death a lot more regularly than we do, and they know when a person is dead. So there's no doubt this guy is dead. Tom?
Also, those circumstances given to why he died. Evidently, sick unto death, various different things.
So your question is, this guy die of an illness, or did he die in some kind of a gruesome accident? We don't know. So, I guess that's probably not valuable speculation. But what if it had been? What if he'd been gored by a bull? That guy's dead for sure. Wayne?
Well, and we don't know any more about, but typically he would have been wrapped with various spices by the relatives who would have come, and they would have surely known that he was dead. The mother herself, a mother knows whether or not the child is dead.
And I think you're exactly right. And even if he was not dead, but he sure looked dead, he was so close to death, we're going to assume he's. How can he sit up and start talking? Even if he's not dead, the fact that he could sit up and talk, it's a crazy, foolish attempt to explain away the miracle. Eric?
Does it say he was a Jew and his mother was a Jew? Does it say that? I mean, it's a good assumption, but I didn't see it.
It doesn't say it, but I think Nain is a city of Galilee. It would have been a Jewish area. So I would assume, although it's not stated, I would think a pretty strong assumption, almost certain that she was Jewish. Because Jesus, other times when some Gentiles wanted a blessing from him, he says, remember one time he said to the Syrophoenician widow, it's not right for the children's bread to be cast to the dogs. And she said, yes, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall off the table. And he blessed her. So he, without him making some point of the fact that she wasn't Jewish, I would assume almost certainly she was. Wait. Yeah, I mean, I'm in big trouble. You guys are right in line tonight.
So, the stages of death, I don't think they've changed since man was created. But, the body goes into certain changes after it dies. Rigor mortis.
Yeah. How long, I think I've known this before, how long before rigor mortis sets in?
I can't remember, but I'm 6 hours or so.
About 6 hours?
About 6 hours.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then,
So it's very possible this guy could have been stiff.
the body releases the fluids, they drain out of the body. I mean, there's ways that people knew back then.
They knew. They surely knew. Yeah, exactly right. JD?
Just about like people who would be skeptical of him not really being dead. I mean, occasionally you'll see some news article, these days, like in some third world country, somebody was at the, funeral home about to be embalmed and they realized they weren't dead. A lot of times it's like a pretty elderly person. But even then, those people don't sit up and start talking.
Yeah.
It's like they notice extremely shallow breaths.
Yeah.
They take them back to the hospital and generally within 2 or 3 days they're gone.
Yeah. You're exactly right. So, you have heard of someone buried alive or being prepared for burial and they found out he wasn't dead. But the percentage chances of that in relationship to the number of people who really die each day and are buried is so infinitesimally small you couldn't even calculate it.
And like we're saying, even among those cases, those people didn't just sit up and start talking
Yeah.
just like normal.
Yeah.
They just barely noticed
Exactly right.
those minimal signs of life.
Exactly right. Okay, so the result of the miracle is what we always say, is what it was for. In verse 16, there came a great fear on all, and they glorified God, saying that a great prophet is risen up among us, and that God hath visited his people. And this rumor of him went forth throughout all Judea and throughout all the region round about. And so the news is spreading. The news is spreading. This guy's not, this is somebody special. Notice they identify him as verse 16, as a great prophet. And Jesus was a prophet. He was a prophet, priest, and king. Jesus held all three offices. But here, I think they're still trying to figure out. Notice they didn't the Messiah. They didn't say the Messiah has come. They said a great prophet is risen up. So they're still in the process of getting this message. All right, now I think the interesting part of this is right on the heels of this, and it's the reason why I included the next few verses. John called to him, verse 19, John called to him 2 of his disciples and sent them to Jesus, saying, Art thou he that should come, or look we for another? And when the men were coming to him, they said, John the Baptist has sent us unto thee, saying, Art thou he that should come, or look we for another? So, I'm wondering about John here. What do you think about John? Do you think that John, because he's being harshly persecuted, right? He hasn't, escaped all the persecutions that anybody ever experienced, but he's really been put upon. And do you think John is wavering now? John is saying, go ask him. Guys, I'm not sure anymore. I thought I knew, but I'm not sure anymore. Go ask Jesus, is he the one we're looking for? Is he the Messiah? Or are we going to be looking for somebody else? Because I'm not sure anymore. You go check with him. You think that's the proper explanation? Anybody?
I don't think so. You know, John baptized Jesus, and on that baptism, dove came down and rose from heaven. This is my beloved Son. You know, John knew that was the Son of God.
I think so.
Of course, we talked about this question before, but I think John was having his disciples go and to realize that Jesus had done miracles, realize that all these miracles that Jesus had done, he was the Son of God.
Yeah.
And it's for them more than it was for John.
I think so too. I think that's exactly right. I don't think, if there's anybody, with the possible exception of his mother Mary, who would have known beyond any shadow of doubt that Jesus was the Messiah. If there's anybody else besides his mother Mary who should have been and would have been absolutely 100% certain that this is the Messiah, it was John the Baptist. He knew this by inspiration, God's revelation. John is not wavering here. I just don't accept that. I think, like Gordon said, he's sending his disciples for their benefit. Sarah?
So John would have been in prison when this happened.
Yeah.
And I think, you think maybe it might be possible that he was, when he said that he must decrease and Jesus must increase, and that he was pushing them towards.
I think so. I think that's exactly right. I think Sarah makes a good point. I must decrease, he must increase. He's trying to get his disciples to not be his disciples anymore, be Jesus' disciples. So I think the right explanation to this is, so how did Jesus answer that? Jesus didn't say, you go back and tell that rascal John, come on, man, get your act together. How could you be so weak in the faith? Come on, man. He didn't chide John. He said, he didn't answer the question yes or no. He didn't answer it. Yes, I am. Of course I am. He said, you go your way and tell John what things ye have seen and heard. How the blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the poor have the gospel preached to them. And so in answer to the question, are you the one? Jesus' answer is, what do these miracles indicate? You go tell John about the miracles. But they weren't telling John that for John's benefit. John knew. I think it was for their benefit. Gary?
Yeah, just as Sarah mentioned, if he was in prison, I guess he just wanted to be reassured
Yeah.
that he's had his two disciples.
Yeah.
He wasn't able to get out and, continue to do what he was doing. So
Yeah, he's in prison. And he before very long, he's going to be beheaded. And he wants these disciples to move over to Jesus because that's what it's all about anyway. So I think it was for the disciples' sake. Very interesting. But again, notice the proof, the miracles are the proof. Are you the one we're looking for, or do we seek another? Look at the miracles. The miracles answer that question. The miracles are the proof. All right, Tom?
New American Standard is one of the places that they capitalize a number of things in the description. There, where it says, "Go and report to John that you have seen what you've seen and heard," and then it says, "The blind have received sight." New American Standard capitalizes that. The lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, and the dead are raised up. The poor have had gospel, and that's So he talks about the blind receiving sight, and then he talks about the poor having the gospel. Sort of two things are, that light that has come into the world, that blindness. Is he talking about actual blindness, but some of this blindness that many of the...
I think that's talking about physical blindness. I don't think it's talking about spiritual blindness.
It's interesting that the one thing they capitalize it in one place and they don't.
Yeah, I don't know why they'd capitalize that. That's an interpreter's judgment, but I don't know.
Yes.
Wayne.
It's a quotation from Isaiah 35.
Yeah.
And when the quotation is given, typically it's
That's right. In the New American Standard, they often capitalize all the letters in a quote. I didn't think about that. That's exactly right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's go to John 11. Another episode of Jesus raising the dead. This one, very well known. We know the man's name this time. It is Lazarus. Now, we won't take time. It's almost the whole chapter of John 11. We'll just kind of pick out a few verses as we go along and answer the questions. Chapter 11, verse 1. Now a certain man was sick named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore his sister sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified thereby. When Jesus heard that Lazarus was sick, he said, this is not unto death. Well, he is going to die, right? But Jesus already understood what the plan here was for this, that he would use this as an evidence, as a sign, as a proof that he was the Son of God. Verse 6, it says, verse 5, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. When he heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. Then after that, he said to his disciples, let us go into Judea again. So, he heard that Lazarus was sick. They were very concerned for this. This was a serious sickness that the sisters would send from. He wasn't suffering from a common cold. They were aware that this ailment that Lazarus had is this is a life-threatening situation. I mean, he may not make it. You know, that's what we often say. I'm not sure he's going to make it. No, they were saying that. They were saying, not sure Lazarus is going to make it, man. This is very, very serious sickness. And again, I would submit to you, these people knew that. They knew when a sickness was unto death. And they were sending for Jesus with the hope that he could come and keep him from dying. And they're going to say that when they get a little longer. Question 7 says, how did Jesus initially refer to Lazarus' condition? Verse 11, he said unto them, our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep. Then said his disciples, Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well. Howbeit Jesus spake of his death, but they thought that he had spoken of taking a rest in sleep. Then Jesus said unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead. So there wasn't any doubt about it. But he says, verse 15, I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent that ye may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. So if Jesus had gotten there before he died, he was sick, real sick. Jesus got there before he died, and he cured him of the sickness. He'd been doing a lot of that. He'd been healing a lot of sick people, right? It would have been a miracle. No doubt the various details of that would have proven it was not a natural cure, but a supernatural. But raising someone from the dead, you've got to agree, raising someone from the dead would be far more evidentiary, I guess I would say, in regards to his identity. And so he said that he was going, and he says, I'm glad for your sakes. Now, why would he be glad for their sakes? Because of proof, right? Because of the evidence it would supply. If he comes and is able to raise Lazarus from the dead, that's going to be very powerful proof for his disciples. All right, so when Jesus arrives there, by the way, how did Jesus know that Lazarus was now dead? It doesn't say whether messengers came and told him that or he just was supernaturally aware of it. It'd be speculative to say one way or the other, but he knows for certain.
It says they sent word to him,
Where does it say that?
verse 3. So the sisters sent word to him saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick.
Yeah, he knew he was sick, but how did he know in verse 15, or verse 14 rather, Lazarus is dead? How did he get that news? You know, we don't know whether a messenger came and told him or he just supernaturally perceived that it was so. But
Verse 4 indicates that he knows it's going to happen because
Yeah.
he said this sickness does not end in death, but the glory of God
Yeah.
and the Son might be glorified.
Yeah.
by it. So he knew what was going to
he knew how this was going to unfold. Yeah, he knew how this was going to unfold. So how long had Lazarus been dead when Jesus arrived? Verse 17, when Jesus came, he found that he had lain in the grave 4 days already. In fact, if you just take a peek ahead, skip over to verse 39. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, said unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. I go back to the same argument we were making earlier. They buried this guy and he wasn't really even dead. And Jesus pretentiously raised him, like he pretended like he was raising him from the dead. He wasn't even dead. Wait a minute. He's so sick they assume he's dead. Also, we know in this case for sure they wrapped him all up in grave clothes. And he's in the grave for 4 days without water or food. He's already so sick they think he's dead. You think he's going to survive that? Not a chance, right? He is dead. So, and again, these people knew, they recognized that we don't have to go through all that again, but they knew when a dead man was dead. And his sister said, I'm not sure you want to open that tomb up because he's been in there 4 days and it's going to stink. Human body begins to decompose pretty rapidly. And certainly by 4 days, decomposition is well underway. And the stench of death. You know, I know you all have, smelled dead things, probably not dead people, hopefully. Maybe some of you have, I haven't. We've been around dead people, but not decomposing corpses. But you've been, you've maybe an animal died or near your house. There's just a particular stench of death that's different than anything else. And that's what Jesus said, roll the stone away. And his sister said, he's been in there 4 days. It's going to stink real bad if you take that stone away. And so again, they knew about death. So look at verse 20. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary sat still in the house. Then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. Jesus said unto her, thy brother shall rise again. Martha said unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. But Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? And she said, Yea, Lord. I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. And so Martha says to him, and Mary's going to repeat it. Martha said, if you'd just been here, if you'd only been here, he wouldn't have died. She had that kind of faith. He was obviously very, very sick. That's why they sent for Jesus. And if Jesus had arrived before he died, she had the kind of faith that I know that if you had been here, he would not have died. You would have been able to heal him. She had that kind of faith. Jesus said he will rise again. And Martha said, well, I know. And it's kind of interesting to me that she had a comprehension of the idea of a physical resurrection of the dead, which we believe is true. But she had that understanding already. I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. We believe that too, right? And Jesus said, that's not what I'm talking about. Although he goes on to talk about being born again spiritually. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. He's not talking about physical death there in verse 25. He that believeth in me, though he were dead spiritually. he shall live, and whosoever liveth, in other words, whoever is born again, and believeth in me shall never die. That is, never die spiritually, right? So it's kind of interesting that Jesus works in a bit of spiritual instruction in the midst of this physical death situation. But again, she expresses great faith and in Jesus' ability, but it seems like she comes up just a little bit short in thinking that he can raise the dead. If you'd have been here, he wouldn't have died. Okay, he's dead. Let's get him. I'll raise him back. It's almost like she was come up a little bit short of being able to accept that possibility. Now I think that goes to what we were saying earlier. Raising somebody from the dead takes it to the next level, right? Healing a sick person, good. Making a blind person see, making a deaf person hear, curing the leper, all those are great. Raising a dead person is at the next level, right? And so she believed that he could have healed Jesus. Jesus could have healed Lazarus, but she seemed like she's just not confident that he could take that next step and raise the dead. Jesus said he's going to be raised. When they come to the tomb, verse 33, when Jesus therefore saw her weeping. This is Mary, verse 32. When Mary was come where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying unto him, Lord, if thou had been here, my brother had not died. She says the same thing. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled, and said, Where have you laid him? And they said unto him, Lord, come and see. And Jesus wept. Then said the Jews, Behold how he loved him. The point has been made, I think it's a fair point, about the emotional compassion that Jesus possessed. So he sees this weeping and this grieving, intense as it would have been. He groaned in the spirit and was troubled. When they brought him to the tomb, Jesus wept. I think the thing that comes to mind about, well, why would he weep? He knows what he's about to do, right? He's already indicated what he's about to do. He's going to raise him from the dead. Why would he weep? And the only answer to that is because of the compassion he had for the people who were grieving. Wayne?
Another possibility is if you look at verse 37. Where he wept again. Jesus, his spirit groaned with.
Yeah, 38, he groaned again. Yeah.
Yeah. A possibility could be that this is his struggle against Satan's tools, which is death. One of Satan's tools is death. And it could be that he's groaning with this struggle that he's fighting with.
And the scripture says the last enemy that shall be defeated is death. And so, this is the next level, don't you think? Healing a sick person, okay. But overcoming death, as you say, may have been sort of the ultimate test of Jesus' supernatural powers. Possibly so. Tom?
Verse 27. I really hadn't thought about it, but reading it, she makes some pretty bold statements there that, a lot of times it took the disciples a long time to say, Yes, Lord, I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world. She makes a pretty bold statement.
She's got it.
She's got it right now.
As we've been saying along, other people are still trying to fit the pieces of the puzzle together. She's got it figured out.
She's got it figured out.
That's a good observation. I think you're right.
And I think she probably, by acknowledging that he was the Son of God, that he probably raised him from the dead, but she wasn't expecting that. That was something that just was unexpected. That she wasn't requiring him to do so.
Yeah.
Even when we go back to look at the son of the widow there at Nain, it wasn't solicited on Jesus' part to raise him from the dead.
Act of compassion.
An act of compassion that he went through.
Yeah.
And so you have to come in here. They weren't expecting that, but,
Yeah.
you know, I think the question comes, I think a little bit of doubt when they said about, well, rolling the stone back, was he sticking? That comes back and says, well, you know, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. I think I've told you guys this story before, but I still have to laugh at it. I don't know how this could possibly be so, but when I was a kid, I probably was second or third grade, in Bible class, one of our Bible class teachers let us choose our own memory verse. You know, pick a verse and memorize it for next week. We all memorized verse 35 the first week. Jesus wept. But there's, although it's such a short verse, it's powerful. The compassion of Jesus in regards to. I think Wayne may have an interesting insight. This was a real test for Jesus overcoming death, but his compassion for those who were suffering. The others who observed it said in verse 36, "Behold how he loved him." They could tell Jesus was really emotionally attached to Lazarus and his sisters. Eric, what do you got?
Doesn't she attribute the miracles to God though in 22? Or am I splitting hairs there?
Whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee.
They attribute raising,
Yeah, so maybe she's got a good also understanding of the intimate relationship between the Father and the Son there. That because he was empowered to do such things as he was a man on earth, and so God was working through him during his human existence.
You know, very, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus was Jesus' best friends. You know, he spent time with them at her house, you know, and teaching. And so he was very close to these three people.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so we already mentioned 39. I don't know about rolling that stone away. It was a cave. The tomb where they buried him was a cave. We know. Now, for instance, where Jesus was buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, the text says it was a tomb carved out of solid stone. So they had actually chiseled out a cavity in a solid rock wall for a rich man like Joseph of Arimathea to be buried in. This was not that. This was a cave, but we know other instances of them burying caves. Probably one of the famous ones. Abraham buried Sarah in the cave of Machpelah, and so they did use caves, and this was a cave. They took the stone away. Verse 41, they took the stone from the place where the dead was, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I knew that thou hearest me always, but because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. And when he had thus spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And when he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin, Jesus said to them, Loose him, and let him go. So this is a pretty good insight into the burying methods of the Jews. We understand that the way they would bury a person is they would start at the feet with strips of linen cloth, and they would wind around the body. And in the process of winding it, they would be also incorporating these various spices. Aromatic spices, also very gummy, sticky spices. This would all been stuck together with the spices that they used in the burying process. They would wind up to the armpits, then they would lower the arms, start below the fingertips, and start winding again, come all the way up. And in this case, which apparently was common, the head was wrapped in a separate piece of cloth, here identified as a napkin. And we think this is the same way that Jesus would have been buried. So, if he's wound up like that, how can he come forth? Jesus actually says, loose him and let him go. In other words, he wasn't able to get out of those grave clothes on his own. How did he get it? How did he come out of the grave? I don't know, but it's not hard to imagine that he's just sort of levitated out of the grave. I mean, this is a miracle, right? We don't have to have a naturalistic explanation. But he had to have help to get out of the grave clothes. I like this. We're just out of time. I like this in regards to when we talk about Jesus being buried and wrapped in those linen clothes. How did Jesus get out of the clothes? Because remember when they went into the tomb, they saw the grave clothes that Jesus had were left behind. Again, it was a miracle. The resurrection of Jesus was a sure miracle. But in this case, you get kind of a picture of how the Jews buried. And then real quickly, we're just out of time. Many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Mary did believed on him. Notice this. 46, but some of them went their way to the Pharisees and told them what things Jesus had done. Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees at council and said, what do we? For this man doeth many miracles. If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and our nation. One of the most powerful proofs that you could ever offer as to whether these were legitimate miracles or not is that the enemies of Jesus acknowledged his miracles. This man doeth many miracles. And if we just let him go, everybody's going to believe on him. We're going to lose our place. We're going to lose our position of power over the people. We got to do something about this guy. But isn't it just incredible? It's always so incredible to think about that they could acknowledge a miracle like raising a dead man and then say, we got to put a stop to this guy. This is going to ruin our gravy train. You know, that is so amazing to me. Wade, do you have a thought?
Yeah, they could see a miracle like this, have it reported to them, and yet they're only concerned with themselves.
Yeah. That's how blinded you can get. You know, you talk about how blinded can a person get? That's pretty blinded. Pretty blinded, but that's what happened here. All right. I think very powerful cases, both of them, very powerful cases. Jesus raising people from the dead, which, as I said, I think is a miracle at the next level. All right, thanks, everybody.